The air in the private wing of the Ether Gardens Zoo was thick with the sterile scent of disinfectant and the underlying metallic tang of deep despair. Elara, crouching behind a manicured hedge, clutched the heavy bolt cutters, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was under the cover of a moonless, chilly night, but the risk felt immense, a stark, palpable fear that tasted like adrenaline and rust. Her focus, however, wasn't on the alarms or the armed security patrol she'd meticulously avoided. It was on the exhibit. It wasn't the luxurious, spacious habitat advertised in the zoo's brochures. It was a miserable concrete pen, and in the centre was the reason she'd risked everything, a wolf. Not just any wolf. This one was a creature of mythical beauty, massive, with fur the colour of fresh snow and eyes that, even in the dim security lights, burned with an intelligent, horrifying rage. But it was the chain that broke Elara's resolve and galvanised her courage. A thick, industrial-grade metal chain was bolted to the concrete floor, running tautly to a heavy collar around the wolf's neck. He wasn't simply in an enclosure. He was imprisoned. His pacing was desperate, a tortured dance of limited movement that spoke of months, perhaps years, of psychological torment. Every time he reached the end of the chain, he'd give a low, guttural snarl, a sound that wasn't just animalistic but profoundly maddened. Elara, an activist who knew the difference between humane captivity and outright cruelty, knew she had to act. She'd spent weeks observing, planning, and gathering intel on this specific illicit exhibit, a secret tucked away in the back of the zoo's exclusive section. She'd tried the legal route, calls, petitions, even a failed attempt to bribe a zookeeper, but all paths were blocked. The wolf, she realised, was far more valuable to his captors than any money she could offer. His unique, unsettling aura suggested he was a trophy, a secret. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Elara used the small, specialised EMP device she'd acquired. It was a low-level burst, enough to temporarily disrupt the localised perimeter sensors, giving her a small window, a tight 5-minute margin of error. The faint, high-pitched whine of the power drain was immediately followed by a terrifying, absolute silence. She sprinted. Her canvas bag slapped against her hip, and the scent of the nearby evergreen trees mingled with the fear in her nostrils. She reached the chain-link fence, quickly cutting the padlock with a smaller, quieter set of snips. Sliding through the opening, she was now inside the perimeter. The wolf immediately stopped his pacing. His colossal, muscled body tensed, and those piercing gold eyes that held a depth of human-like malice, focused entirely on her. He didn't growl. He just watched, a predatory, terrifying stillness that made Elara freeze mid-step. She knew, instinctively, that this was no ordinary animal. It carried an ancient, raw power. "Hey," she whispered, her voice trembling but soft, the sound of an offering. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm going to get you out of those." She slowly raised the bolt cutters, showing him the tool, not as a weapon but as a key. The wolf's lip curled back, revealing massive fangs, and a low rumble started deep in his chest. He was beautiful, yes, but he was also terrifyingly close to a complete mental breakdown, driven mad by the confinement and the unnatural constraints of the chain. Elara knew she had to be fast. She approached the chain, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. When she was within arm's reach, the wolf lunged not at her, but toward the limit of the chain. His teeth snapped inches from her face, a warning that shook the air around her. She flinched but held her ground. The wolf smelled of ozone and suppressed primal heat. "I know you're angry," she murmured, her gaze meeting his, holding the powerful, maddened intensity. "But you need to trust me. This is your only chance." With a sudden, decisive lunge, she wrapped the massive jaws of the cutters around the heavy links of the collar chain, ignoring the wolf's frantic growl. The crack of the industrial steel snapping was deafening in the silence, a sound of explosive liberation. The chain fell with a clatter onto the concrete. The wolf was free. He didn't run. He stood absolutely still, his massive body vibrating with a sudden, overwhelming surge of raw power. His eyes, for a split second, went from gold to an unnerving, calculating human blue before they snapped back to gold. He looked at the broken chain, then at Elara, a strange, possessive intensity flickering in his gaze. She knew she had mere seconds before the EMP wore off and the alarm screamed, "Go! Run!" she urged, waving her hand toward the outer fence. The wolf didn't move. Instead, he took a step closer to her, his shadow enveloping her small frame, a possessive growl finally escaping his chest. His snout nudged her hand, a gesture that felt less like thanks and more like a claim. The air was suddenly charged with something far more dangerous than simple freedom. The silence of the night was about to be broken, not by alarms, but by the primal roar of a released alpha. Elara had saved a wolf, but she might have just signed her own death warrant, or worse, found herself claimed by a creature whose power she couldn't possibly comprehend. She was now linked to him, whether she wanted it or not. The silence was shattered by a sudden jarring noise. It wasn't the expected piercing scream of the main zoo alarm, but the low, insistent thrumming of a powerful engine approaching quickly on the service road. Elara snapped out of her paralyzed state of awe and fear. "We have to go, now!" she hissed, grabbing the discarded bolt cutters and shoving them back into her bag. The wolf, however, seemed to have no intention of running away. He turned, his huge body moving with a fluid, terrifying grace, and positioned himself squarely between Elara and the sound of the approaching vehicle. His back was to her, a solid wall of white fur and muscle. He was not protecting himself. He was protecting her. This was a terrifying, profound shift in the dynamics of their encounter. The vehicle, a black armoured SUV, screeched to a halt just outside the outer perimeter fence. Two men in dark, tactical gear spilled out, automatic weapons already levelled. They were clearly not zoo security. They were professionals. There! The wolf is loose. And she's with it! One of the men barked into a comms unit. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. These people weren't here to capture an escaped animal. They were here to retrieve a valuable, perhaps sentient asset. They were armed and looked ready to use lethal force. "Target the woman first." "We need to know who helped him," the second man yelled. Before Elara could even react, the white wolf let out a sound that wasn't a growl or a snarl, but a full, earth-shaking roar. It was a sound that vibrated in her bones, a sound of pure, unbridled alpha dominance and fury. It was utterly non-animalistic. It was a powerful human scream, transmuted through a bestial throat. The wolf moved with blinding speed. The tactical men, despite their training, were caught off guard. The wolf didn't engage them with teeth and claws in a wild frenzy. He moved with precision, knocking the rifle out of the first man's hands with a powerful sweep of his snout, and then driving his shoulder into the man's chest, sending him sprawling against the fence with a sickening thud. The second man raised his weapon, trying to get a lock on the large, fast-moving target. "Get down!" Elara screamed, acting purely on instinct. She launched a small, heavy piece of metal, a discarded decorative latch she'd found while scouting, at the man's head. It was a desperate, amateur throw, but it was enough to distract him. That single second of distraction was all the wolf needed. He was on the man in a flash, but again he didn't tear at him. Instead, he simply pinned the man to the ground. His massive head held inches from the man's terrified face, and let out a chilling, dominant snarl. The man dropped his weapon and whimpered, recognizing a power far beyond that of any mere predator. The confrontation was over in seconds. The first man was stunned, the second paralyzed by fear. The white wolf stepped back, taking a final possessive look at the two broken men, and then turned his golden eyes back to Elara. He walked towards her slowly, deliberately. Every muscle in his body was coiled with the raw energy of his transformation, the chains having suppressed an immense power that was now fully unleashed. He was magnificent and terrifying. Elara was frozen. She knew she should run, but she felt rooted to the spot, a strange mix of terror and responsibility. She was a witness to something supernatural, something that defied all logic and biology. The wolf stopped directly in front of her, his head lowered, the massive snout hovering inches from her collarbone. He inhaled deeply, a long proprietary scenting that sent shivers down her spine and made her heart pound an uncontrolled rhythm. Then, he nudged her hard with his head, a clear, unmistakable demand. "Move. Okay, I'm coming," she managed to whisper, her voice ragged. The wolf didn't wait. He turned and bounded towards the far, darker section of the zoo's perimeter, the section she knew backed onto the dense, old-growth forest of the city's greenbelt. Elara had no choice. She was already implicated, already a target. Her life, as she knew it, was over the moment she had cut that chain. With a final surge of desperate courage, she scrambled over the outer fence and followed the impossible, silently moving white shadow into the darkness of the woods. She had set a dangerous creature free, and now it seemed that creature had claimed her. Her rescue mission had become an escape, with the alpha wolf leading the way, his instincts now centered entirely on protecting his unexpected savior. She was running with the most wanted captive in the city. The forest was a labyrinth of twisted roots and ancient shadows. Elara ran, her lungs burning and her legs screaming in protest, desperately trying to keep up with the effortless, powerful pace of the white wolf. He moved like a ghost, silent and fast, occasionally pausing to look back, his eyes catching the moonlight, ensuring she was still following. She didn't know where they were going, or what the endgame was. Her logical mind screamed that she was in the presence of a supernatural beast, perhaps even a highly trained, enhanced animal. But the look in his eyes, the calculating intelligence, the protective possessiveness, told her otherwise. This was no mere beast. They ran for what felt like an hour, the sounds of the city fading behind them, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the frantic beat of her own heart. Finally, the wolf stopped at the base of a massive ancient oak tree that seemed to absorb all the light around it. The air here felt different, heavy, charged, almost dizzying. The wolf turned to face her, his massive body panting, but his eyes never leaving hers. He was magnificent, but the raw power radiating off him was overwhelming, filling the small clearing with a palpable tension. He took a step toward her, and Elara instinctively braced herself, expecting a violent reaction, perhaps a final, deadly rejection of her help now that they were safe. Instead, the wolf did the unexpected. He lowered his head and nudged her hand once more. A soft, intimate gesture of acknowledgement. Then, the true horror or miracle began. The wolf let out a deep, shuddering exhale, and his massive body began to tremble violently. Elara watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the very structure of the creature began to contort. The white fur seemed to ripple and recede, pulling inward, and the powerful limbs began to shorten and reshape. The snout elongated and then rapidly compressed, the bone structure shifting with unnatural speed. A sound of tearing fabric and cracking joints filled the air, a sound so unnatural it made Elara cover her mouth to stifle a scream. The white fur retreated, the shape of a massive man emerging underneath, slick with sweat and the residue of the transformation. The change was agonizingly quick, violent, and complete, where the giant wolf had stood. A man now knelt, completely naked, his body powerful and finely sculpted, his frame radiating an overwhelming sense of dominance and strength. He was breathtakingly handsome, with high cheekbones, a sharp jawline, and thick midnight black hair that looked slightly damp with the exertion of the shift. But it was his eyes that truly stunned her. They were a vivid, calculating blue, the same intense human blue she'd briefly seen flicker in the wolf's gaze back in the cage. They were the eyes of a powerful, intelligent, and utterly ruthless man. He rose slowly to his full, immense height, a shadow of raw, primal male power. He looked down at Elara, his gaze sweeping over her face, his lips curled into an almost imperceptible, possessive smirk. "You," he rasped, his voice deep, gravelly, and full of the lingering, untamed power of the alpha. The sound was undeniably male, not animal. "You cut the chain." Elara could only stand there, speechless, her entire worldview shattering around her. She had saved a wolf, but she had freed a man who was clearly something far more than human. A shifter, and if the rumours of the city's underbelly were true, this man was the most dangerous kind of shifter, an alpha. He took a step towards her, and she felt the instinctive need to retreat, but the power in his gaze held her captive. He stopped within touching distance, a dominating presence that made the entire clearing feel too small. "My name is Rylan Thorne," he said, his voice dropping an octave, a deep, resonant sound that felt like a command. "And you, Elara, have just saved the life of a very, very powerful enemy." He reached out a hand, his fingers long and strong, and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly tender, given the intensity of his stare. "My mate." The pronouncement was not a question, not a hope, but a statement of undeniable absolute fact, sealing her fate in the supernatural world she had only just discovered. Rylan Thorne. The name was a seismic shock in the already shattered landscape of Ilara's mind. Rylan Thorne. The man whose face was on every business magazine. The ruthless, impossibly young CEO of Thorne Global Security, a multi-billion-dollar corporation with a finger in everything from city surveillance to military contracts. The man who had been missing and presumed in hiding for the last 6 months after a hostile takeover attempt. The chained wolf was him. Ilara took a stumbling step back, her disbelief warring with the cold, hard reality of the naked, powerful man standing before her. Rylan Thorne. You're the CEO, she stammered, the words feeling utterly inadequate. The one and only, Rylan confirmed, his blue eyes sharp with a predatory amusement, a man comfortable with his own terrifying power. And an alpha, which, as you can see, complicates the corporate world. It seems my rivals believed chaining my wolf side would make the corporate takeover easier. They were very close to succeeding. He glanced down at the place where the heavy collar had been, a flicker of pure, lethal fury crossing his face. They knew you were a shifter? Ilara asked, her mind racing. The world was suddenly not what she thought it was. Of course they did. My power is my strength in the boardroom, but it's also my greatest vulnerability, Rylan replied, his gaze intensely locking with hers. And you, Ilara, he said, drawing out her name as if savouring a rare vintage. You interfered with high-level corporate warfare. The men you saw? They were employed by my former COO, a slimy hyena shifter who thought he could claim my territory. The reality of the situation hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't just saved a wolf. She had intervened in a high-stakes, supernatural business coup. She was no longer just an activist. She was now an essential piece of evidence, a witness, and terrifyingly, an accomplice. I need to go, she whispered, taking another tentative step back, suddenly desperate to escape the intense gravitational pull of his presence. I did what I came to do. I freed you. Now I have to leave. Rylan's hand shot out, not grabbing her, but merely placing his fingers around her wrist. The touch was non-threatening, but the latent strength in his grip was an undeniable warning. No, you don't, he stated, his voice now lower, a dangerous rumble of possessive authority. You don't understand what you've done. When you cut that chain, you didn't just break metal. You broke a highly specialized restraint that was designed to drive my wolf mad, to suppress my alpha scent and my ability to shift at will. You took a risk, and in doing so, your scent, your life force, became inextricably linked to my survival. You are marked, Ilara. He pulled her closer, his gaze dropping to her throat where her pulse was now hammering wildly. The bond is immediate and absolute for an alpha who is on the brink of losing himself. You are my fated mate. That is not a corporate contract I can terminate. It is a primal biological truth. You saved me, and now you belong to me. My wolf demands it. Ilara stared up at him, breathless. Fated mate. The concept was medieval, romantic, and utterly terrifying in the context of this ruthless CEO alpha. I don't believe in that kind of thing, she protested weakly. A genuine smile, sharp and unnerving, finally curved Rylan's lips. Good, because whether you believe it or not, the men who chained me are now hunting me, and they know you helped. If they find you, they will use you to get to me. You are no longer safe on your own. You are coming with me, and I will protect what is mine. He released her wrist, and with a silent, fluid movement, walked to the base of the oak tree. He reached behind a thick root, retrieving a small camouflaged bundle of clothes. He was prepared even in his captivity. He quickly dressed in simple dark trousers and a tight-fitting shirt that did little to hide the powerful musculature of his torso. You have 2 choices. Ilara, Rylan said, looking up as he buttoned his shirt. Trust the man you just freed and follow me to safety, or try to run back to your old life and face the consequences of crossing a billion-dollar corporate conspiracy alone. I suggest you choose wisely. Time is running out. His gaze was the only answer she needed. She was caught between a ruthless alpha and a murderous corporation. Her choice was already made for her. Ilara made her choice, or rather Rylan made it for her. She followed him out of the woods and into a secluded clearing, where a sleek, high-end motorcycle was hidden under a tarp. It was the kind of vehicle that screamed wealth and speed. Get on, Rylan commanded, already swinging his long leg over the seat. He offered her a helmet, which she took with numb fingers. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the throaty roar of the engine as he brought it to life. She climbed on behind him, her hands hovering awkwardly over his shoulders. "Where are we going?" she shouted over the engine noise. Rylan pulled out of the clearing with a burst of speed that pressed her back against him. "We are going to my primary territory," he shouted back, his voice an intoxicating blend of power and confidence. "My Pax compound. The only place safe enough from my rivals and the city's corrupt surveillance." The ride was a dizzying blur of speed and adrenaline. Rylan navigated the back roads and highways with the expert ease of a man who owned the very streets he drove on. Ilara was forced to cling to his waist, her face pressed against the solid, warm expanse of his back. The scent of him, ozone, musk, and a powerful, clean male scent that was undeniably alpha, was overwhelming. It was a scent that her subconscious was already recognizing, claiming, a dizzying fact she tried to push away. They finally pulled up to a massive, imposing estate tucked deep into the mountains just outside the city limits. The entire property was enclosed by a 12-foot-high, high-tech security wall, invisible laser grids, and surveillance cameras that were clearly far superior to any government grade. This was not a house. It was a fortress, the home of a CEO, yes, but also the den of an alpha. As they entered the compound, they were immediately met by a team of highly trained security personnel, or rather, a group of powerful men and women who shifted in their stance as Rylan approached, their eyes flicking between the CEO and the frightened woman clinging to his back. Ilara realised with a sinking heart that these were his people, his pack. One man, who was just as tall as Rylan but with kind, serious eyes, stepped forward. He radiated the scent of a beta, second in command, the pack's pillar. "Alpha Rylan, by the moon, you're back. We thought—" The beta's voice trailed off, his relief palpable. Then his eyes landed on Ilara, and his kind demeanour hardened. "Elias," Rylan said, cutting him off with a firm, non-negotiable tone. "This is Ilara. She is the one who freed me. She is under my protection and my claim. Prepare the secure quarters. I need a full security update, and I need the entire compound on lockdown. No one leaves, no one enters. I want the hyenas' movements tracked, and I want a full sweep of the entire property for bugs." Elias, the beta, nodded immediately, his eyes showing a flash of recognition. "Understood, Alpha. The hyena will pay for this. Welcome home." He gave Ilara a brief, intense look that seemed to be assessing her worth and her danger before he turned to issue the commands. Rylan dismounted and pulled Ilara off the bike, holding her steady. His touch was a strange mix of necessary support and possessive ownership. "This is not a zoo, Ilara," Rylan said, his voice low and serious. "This is my home, my territory. You are safe here, but you are not free to wander. The compound is full of shifters. They will recognize my claim on you instantly. Do not try to run. It will only endanger yourself and provoke them." He led her through the massive front doors and into a foyer that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, and a terrifyingly efficient silence. "You need to rest, and then we need to talk business," Rylan said, ushering her up a sweeping staircase. "Business?" Ilara asked, confused. She was thinking of survival, not corporate strategy. "Yes, my wolf has bonded with you, but I need a human cover story to justify your presence here to the board and the world," Rylan said. His eyes now completely in CEO mode, cold, calculating, and absolutely brilliant. "From this moment forward, Ilara, you are not a zoo activist. You are my highly secretive, long-time fiancé. We have an empire to reclaim, and you are now an essential part of my corporate and primal strategy." Ilara knew then that her life had not just changed. It had been fully and irrevocably annexed by the Alpha CEO. Ilara was ushered into a suite that could have rivaled a 5-star hotel. It was expansive, tastefully decorated in neutral, expensive tones, and most importantly, secured with a reinforced door and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the rugged mountain landscape. It was a luxurious cage. Rylan, ever the Alpha CEO, didn't waste time on pleasantries. After a brief shower and a change of clothes, a dark suit that made him look even more intimidating, he returned to the room, setting a laptop down on the mahogany desk. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a velvet armchair. "We need to go over your new identity. Elias is already working on the paperwork, but you need to know the details. My new identity? Ilara asked, still reeling from the fiancé bombshell. I have a life. Friends. A job. You had a life, Ilara. That life is incompatible with the survival of the alpha of the most powerful pack in the country. Rylan interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. You risked everything for me. Now you live under my protection. This is the trade-off. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, his eyes boring into hers. You are now Ilara Vance, an enigmatic, high-profile environmental consultant who has been secretly advising me for years. We met through a mutual acquaintance in Zurich. We have been secretly engaged for 6 months, conveniently matching the time I was out of commission. Ilara felt a wave of nausea. This is insane. People will investigate. They'll know this is a lie. They will investigate, yes, but they will find nothing. Rylan corrected with a chilling confidence. My security firm specialises in creating untraceable digital footprints. Your old records are being scrubbed and replaced with new ones that integrate seamlessly with your new profile. You will have a degree from a top London university, a non-existent family with a trust fund, and a private villa in Tuscany that you never visit. Trust me, the fabricated truth is often more convincing than the real one. But why a fiancé? Why not just a colleague? Or a bodyguard? Ilara demanded, the injustice of the situation fueling her anger. Rylan stood up, walking toward the window, his back to her. Because of the bond, he stated simply, his voice losing some of its corporate edge and gaining a primal resonance. My wolf recognizes you as his mate. My pack knows. They smell it on me, and now they smell it on you. If I introduce you as merely a colleague, they will not accept it. They will challenge it. And my rivals, the hyena and his lot, will see a weakness. They will see you as a temporary liability they can exploit. The title of Alpha's mate, fiancé, is the highest form of protection I can give you. It is a shield that tells every shifter, friend or foe, that you are untouchable. You are mine. He turned back to face her, his gaze intense. The CEO needs a partner to stabilise the company during this crucial period of my return. The Alpha needs his mate to stabilise his mind and his power. It serves both my worlds, Ilara, and since you are now intrinsically linked to both, you must play the role. Ilara looked down at her hands, the weight of the gold chain she'd cut feeling heavy on her conscience. She had acted out of a genuine desire to save an animal, and in doing so, she had chained herself to a life of corporate intrigue, supernatural politics, and a possessive Alpha. What do I have to do? She finally asked, her voice low and resigned. Rylan's expression softened slightly, a brief flash of admiration replacing the cold resolve. For now you need to look the part. You will be seen, but you will not speak much. Your role is to appear utterly devoted to me, and utterly unaware of the supernatural world. We have a press conference in 48 hours. The world needs to see Rylan Thorne back and stronger than ever, with his mysterious fiancé by his side. He walked over to her, his shadow falling over her small frame, and gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, Ilara, I will guide you, and I will protect you. You are my greatest asset now. His words were a promise, and a chilling warning all rolled into one. The next 36 hours were a blur of intense preparation. Rylan was a demanding and efficient teacher. Ilara was coached on everything from investment portfolios to the subtle nuances of Alpha Pack dynamics. She learned that the shifters were divided into clans, and Rylan's wolf pack was the oldest and most powerful, controlling much of the city's financial infrastructure. The hyena, whose name was Damon, was an opportunistic, vicious beta who had tried to seize power during Rylan's forced absence. Damon's clan has always been ambitious, Rylan explained during a late-night strategy session in the secure study. They lack the sheer power of a wolf alpha, so they rely on manipulation, infiltration, and ruthlessness. He's the one who orchestrated the trap at the zoo. But why the zoo? Ilara asked, trying to keep the horror out of her voice. Rylan's eyes darkened with remembered pain. The chains were saturated with a rare chemical designed to suppress my shifting ability, while simultaneously inflaming my wolf's territorial and aggressive instincts, driving me insane. They wanted to force a complete, permanent regression into a feral state, making me legally certifiable and erasing me as CEO. The zoo was merely a public, secure holding cell. He gave her a sharp look. You saved me from a fate far worse than death. Elara, you gave me back my mind. The depth of her action finally sunk in, intensifying the strange, frightening bond between them. She was given an expensive, custom-made wardrobe that matched her new consultant persona. She practiced the art of the devoted fiancé, the subtle proprietary touch on his arm, the adoring but quiet gaze, the confidence of a woman utterly secure in her position. It felt like acting in the most dangerous play of her life, with the fate of a corporate empire and a powerful shifter pack resting on her performance. Rylan, despite his alpha commands and possessive nature, treated her with a strange, careful respect. He didn't push the physical boundaries of the mate bond, recognizing her fear and the need for space. He was a dominant presence, but he was also a man who owed her his life, and that debt was a powerful leash on his primal instincts. "We go live in an hour," Rylan announced, entering the suite, looking impossibly sharp in a custom-tailored suit that cost more than Elara made in a year. "The press conference is being held in the main ballroom. I will do all the talking. You simply stand beside me, confident and calm. A pillar of support." As he spoke, Elias knocked and entered, carrying a small velvet box. "Alpha, this just arrived. It's on a loop of high-resolution security footage from the gate. A drone drop." Rylan took the box, his expression instantly hard. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a silver, crudely fashioned cufflink, a hyena's head. Attached was a small, encrypted thumb drive. "Damon!" Rylan growled, his hand crushing the cufflink. "A message." He plugged the drive into his secure tablet. The screen displayed a single, grainy photograph. It was a picture of Elara, taken from a distance, standing outside her old, unassuming apartment building just 2 days ago. It was a clear threat. Damon knew who she was, where she lived, and he knew she was the key to Rylan's return. "He's confirming he knows your true identity, not the false one," Rylan stated, his voice a low, vibrating menace. "He's reminding me that my fiancé facade is weak. He wants me to know he has access to my life, to my territory." He deleted the file and smashed the thumb drive on the desk. "This changes things. The press conference is now necessary to lock down the illusion. He needs to see you, truly see you, standing with me, claiming you. It's the only way to solidify your protection." Rylan turned to Elara, his eyes blazing with a mixture of alpha possessiveness and CEO determination. "Are you ready, Elara? You are walking onto the main stage of the Shifters' corporate war. My life and the pack's safety depend on your performance." Elara took a deep breath, the fear still a cold knot in her stomach, but now mixed with a surge of genuine defiance. She had come to save a wolf, and now she would fight a hyena. "I'm ready, Rylan," she said, raising her chin, finding a surprising well of resolve. "Let's give them a show. Let's give them a show."